buyers and sellers. Now, for the purpose of the seminar, I'm just going to turn off my video so that the internet connection is stable. If you guys get interrupted in any way, please just let me know. So let's go. Just quickly in the chat box, can everyone just give an indication if you can hear me properly before I continue? Okay, perfect. So guys, this is actually a very interesting talk. I'm not sure if you work with a lot of foreigners. I think it's important to know this information because at some point in your profession, you are going to work with a foreign buyer or seller. Now, from this whole seminar, there are several important things that you need to take note of. And what I'm going to do is, it's going to be a lot of information, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to explicitly tell you that you must make a note of this or this or this. And then when you work with a foreign buyer or seller, you just go back to your lists of points that I told you to write down, and you can use that when working or dealing with a foreign buyer or seller. So just to quickly break the ice, who is not a foreigner? I think all of us know this video. Just want to make sure it plays. Okay, doesn't seem that's working. Let's rather continue because there's a lot of information that I would like to cover. It's just a video of a wimpy ad. Okay, so who is a foreigner? When working with let's call them non-residents for now. When working with a non-residents, there's always 3 spheres that you will work with. Not necessarily you, more your client. It's the Department of Home Affairs, it's SARS on the other hand, and then also the South African Reserve Bank. The Department of Home Affairs, because obviously you have to determine whether your client is a resident or non-resident, or if he's here on a visa. SARS on the other hand, your client will have to pay tax. And then the Reserve Bank on the other hand, because your client, who's a non-resident, is going to bring money into the country, and perhaps later he decides to sell the property and then you have to take the money back out of the country. That's why the Reserve Bank also finds application. So, okay. This is a question that we get a lot. How do you determine whether my client is a non-resident of South Africa? Obviously, the moment you start to interact with your client, you can already notice that his accent is different. He is definitely not from South Africa. He is perhaps from Australia or America. But what are the things to look at in order to ensure that you are 100% correct when saying that this individual is a non-resident? How do you determine if a person is a non-resident? The first thing you can ask the client is whether he has a South African ID, either the green ID book or a ID card. Then you can also determine how many, or ask the client how many days he's spending in South Africa. Is he here only for a month? Is he perhaps here for 2 years consecutively? Another question to ask is whether that client has a permanent residency application and a permit, or also if that client has formally immigrated to South Africa. Now, these are all questions you can ask in order to determine whether your client is a South African or a non-resident. The easiest way to determine whether your client is indeed a non-resident is the following, and this can be your first point to write down. First, ask that non-resident, does he have a green South African ID book? If not, then you know he is a non-resident. If that non-resident applied for permanent residency and the application was granted by the Department of Home Affairs, he will then be a resident of South Africa. The other easy way to determine whether your client is a resident or a non-resident is to ask him or her for a copy of his passport. And then you just go to the relevant pages where the visas are stamped. You get different visas, and we're going to look at that later. But the moment that there's a stamp in that passport, you obviously know that this client is a non-resident. He's only temporarily in South Africa. He is not permanently in South Africa. So, okay, when it comes to having the agreement of sale signed, whether it's the seller or the purchaser, non-residents, the best way to ensure that that is done properly is to get both spouses to sign the agreement of sale, irrespective of whether your non-resident is the seller or irrespective of whether your non-resident is the purchaser. Now, this is also a question that we get a lot from estate agents. They usually ask, Stefan, how will the transfer process differ if a purchaser or a seller is a non-resident? To answer that question, there is no difference. The transfer process is exactly the same, irrespective of whether your seller or buyer is a resident or a non-resident. The only thing that you as an estate agent needs to know, and this is very important, and this can be the second bullet on your list. When your purchaser or seller are non-residents and they are overseas when concluding the agreement of sale, you need to inform them that there's going to be certain documents, like a power of attorney and the attorney's transfer documents, that they will have to sign overseas in front of a notary. So let me explain this by using an example. We recently had a client from the Netherlands who was sitting in the Netherlands. He browsed Property 24 and he saw a house in Somerset West that he liked. And then he decided he's going to buy it without even looking at the property. And you guys know that we do get situations like that. In such an instance, you as the estate agent needs to inform whether it's the buyer or seller, that they will have to sign certain transfer documents, and because they are overseas, they will have to go and sign it in front of a notary. A notary is just a better description of a commissioner of oath, because those transfer documents that we draft and get the clients to sign, it always gets signed in front of a commissioner of oath. But because your clients are sitting in another country, they have to go to a notary public to have that done. And then obviously it will have to be couriered back to us in South Africa. So that can be your second point on your list. You must always explain to your non-resident buyer or seller that if they buy property in South Africa and they are not in South Africa when signing the agreement of sale or when the transfer process is happening, they need to sign certain transfer documents overseas in front of a notary. Then also something else that we've noticed. When we get the instruction to do the transfer, we obviously draft our pro forma account that goes to the purchaser, and the purchaser needs to pay that. And with more expensive properties over R1 million, transfer duty is payable to SARS. And that's a tax that the purchaser needs to pay to SARS. And non-resident purchasers don't always know that. So my advice would be, and this can be the third point on your list, explain to your non-resident purchaser that because they are the purchasers, they need to pay transfer duty, which is a tax, on acquiring the property, and they need to pay that tax to SARS. Sometimes it happens that we send off a pro forma account, and then there is a significant amount on the bill, which is the transfer duty that we collect and then just pay over to SARS. But they are quite shocked because they never knew that they had to pay this significant amount of money. They never knew that they had to pay transfer duty. So just perhaps also explain that explicitly to your client when it's a non-resident buyer. Okay, so obviously FICA is the new in word. When working with a non-resident individual, what FICA do you need? You need a copy of the foreign identity document or his or her passport. You also need proof of a residential address, which is not less than 3 months old. And then if a third party is acting on behalf of the non-resident buyer or seller, meaning a person that's acting in terms of a power of attorney, you also need that person's ID and proof of residence. Then, I don't know which of you have worked with a non-resident company or non-resident trust. Me personally, I've never worked with such a purchaser or buyer. And so I don't get the impression you will ever come across something like this, but it's always still good to know. When you are working with a non-resident company or a trust, the FICA documents that you need to obtain from your client is a copy of the foreign company registration documents, also the proof of the business address of that company or trust, a resolution on the company's letterhead signed by all the directors, nominating one specific person to sign. Obviously, if there's 10 directors, you're not going to send the agreement of sale to all 10 directors. They are going to do a resolution in terms of where only one person is mandated to sign that agreement. And then also, if there are someone else that's going to sign on behalf of the company or trust, like a object third party or an agent, power of attorney will be done, and FICA documents of that specific person also needs to be obtained. So, okay, we are now going to look at financial residency and also tax residency. This is what I would actually like to discuss, because there's something very interesting when it comes to non-resident sellers. And we've noticed that not a lot of agents and also not a lot of attorneys knows about this. But this is crucial. If you can give your client this advice, they are going to be highly impressed with your services. But we will get to that now. So, another question that we usually get asked is, can a non-resident obtain a bond in South Africa? You get 3 or 4 types of non-resident visitors in South Africa. The first one is a holiday traveler. I would like to go to America for a few weeks. I fly there, I get a holiday travel visa the moment I leave the airport for, let's say, 3 months. And now I see a property that I would really like to buy. If that was in South Africa, a non-resident traveler will be able to obtain bond for a 50%, but the requirements of the Reserve Bank is that the other 50% of the purchase price needs to be paid in cash, and that cash must come from a foreign source. It must come from a foreign bank account. So that's the first type of visa that you get. And then the next one is a temporary resident permit. Now, this visa is usually issued to non-residents, foreigners, who come to South Africa just for a certain period to either work or study. And I know the slide says that they can get a 75% loan from a financial institution in South Africa should they want to buy property. And then it also says that 25% must come from a foreign source. This has, I think, a month ago changed. A temporary resident that's in South Africa for, let's say, 3 years, because the course or the degree that the non-resident is doing at Stellenbosch is 3 years long, that person can now get 100% bond approval from a financial institution in South Africa. But it's just subject to the normal risk assessment by the financial institution. So just take note, temporary residents can now get 100% bond approval. They don't need to bring in any amount from a foreign bank account. Then you can also get a permanent resident permit or visa. This is when certain requirements are met. The requirements are just you need to be in South Africa if you're a non-resident. You need to be in South Africa for a certain amount of years and a certain amount of days in that year. And once those requirements are met, you are allowed as a non-resident to bring a permanent resident application. And when it gets granted by the Department of Home Affairs, that non-resident becomes a permanent resident of South Africa. They have the right to vote. They are issued with a green ID book. They get an income tax number to SARS, and they need to submit annual returns. And they can obviously, just like all the other South Africans, get 100% bond approval without the requirement of bringing any funds from overseas. Then there's a fourth category, and that's the expats. That's all our brothers and sisters and all these young guys that now going to work overseas for a few years and then they come back to South Africa. They remain South African citizens. They don't distance themselves from South Africa because they are going to return to South Africa once they are finished with their work. Now, an expat, because an expat stays a South African citizen, they can get 100% bond approval subject to affordability. If your brother goes to America for 3 years just to travel, he will still be an expat, but because he's not earning an income while he's traveling, he will most likely not be able to obtain a bond because he has no income and the bank is not going to accept a risk like that. Unless, on the other hand, he has 3 million rand in the bank as security. So just to briefly summarize, a non-resident, someone who just comes to South Africa for a month in a matter of a year, or 2 or 3 perhaps, they stay non-residents of South Africa, they can get in South Africa 50% bond approval, but the other 50% of the purchase price must be paid in cash, and that cash must come from a foreign bank account. Then, temporary residents, they're just in South Africa for a certain period to either work or study. They can get, as I said, 100% bond approval now. Permanent residents, they've met certain requirements. They brought the permanent resident application. It was granted by the Department of Home Affairs. They are now South African citizens, and they can get 100% bond approval. And then on the other hand, expats who just goes overseas for a certain amount of time to either work or to travel, they remain citizens of South Africa, and because of that, they can also get 100% bond approval, subject to affordability. Now we are getting to the fun part, tax. So the first thing that you need to know, we as South Africans, let's not talk about non-residents. We as South African residents pay income tax on our worldwide income. So if I own 3 businesses in South Africa, I work for STBB, I get a salary from STBB, I get a salary from my 2 companies that I own and run, and I also have a rental property in London. I'm going to pay income tax on all that income, even on the income that I receive from the flat in London. Because in South Africa, we have a tax system where we are taxed on our worldwide income. Now, non-residents are only taxed on South African sourced income. So let's use a guy from Belgium, for example. Because he's a non-resident of South Africa, he obviously pays income tax there in Belgium. But if he owns 5 rental properties that he leases out, the income that he will get, he will need to pay income tax on that to South African Revenue Services. Now, in order to determine whether a non-resident, for tax purposes, or a tax resident, there's 2 tests. Now, I don't want to go into too much detail with these 2 tests. This is never something that you will work with. This will always be the job of the accountant to make sure that if the client needs to pay income tax in South Africa, if he's a non-resident, he needs to look at these 2 tests. Now, the first test that needs to be looked at is this non-resident ordinarily resident in South Africa? Let me rather explain this by using an example. There's a client from Belgium. He is in South Africa for 5 months. He has been in South Africa for 5 months for the past 6 years. Let's rather make it 2 months. He has been in South Africa for 2 months these past 5 years, but South Africa is not his home. He has a nice house in Sea Point, and when he's in South Africa for that 2 months, he just lives there. He goes on a small holiday in Cape Town, but once he's finished, he's going to go back to Belgium. He's ordinary resident in Belgium. The question asked in a specific case that determined this principle was actually, where will this individual return after his wanderings? So where does this person consider his real home to be? Obviously, the Belgian guy, he just comes to South Africa for a holiday for a month or 2, and then he's going to go back to Belgium because his primary residence is there. His bed and kitchen appliances is in his home in Belgium. So he's ordinary resident in Belgium, and therefore he will not be a tax resident of South Africa. He will not be, because he's not ordinary resident in South Africa. Then after this test has been asked and has been answered, you need to look at the second test. And this is a little more difficult. So what happens with this test is a certain calculation needs to be done. In order for a person, a non-resident, to be a tax resident, they have to be in South Africa for 91 days in a year of assessment for the 5 past years. And for that 5 past years, they should have been in South Africa in total 915 days. And in the last year of assessment, the year of assessment in question, they had to be in South Africa also for 91 days. I don't want to go into too much detail with this. As I said, you'll never work with it. But just know, in order, if your non-resident client ever asks you, will I have to pay tax in South Africa? Then you can then just tell them, listen, your accountant will need to answer that question, but there are 2 tests that needs to be applied. The one test is, where will you return after your wanderings in South Africa? Will you return to the Netherlands or to Belgium? Or are you going to stay in South Africa for the rest of your life? And then there's also another question. How many days have you been in South Africa for a certain amount of years? And just to give them a sort of indication of what questions they can be expected to answer the accountant. Okay, I've explained that in detail. So this, of the whole talk today, this is the most important thing that I would like to discuss with you. Section 35A of the Income Tax Act. Now, you've all heard of the concept of withholding tax, and you've also heard of the concept of capital gains tax. Now, withholding tax and capital gains tax must be seen as a synonym. See them as the same thing. They are not different. Both of them are the same tax. The wording is just different. Why do we call capital gains tax on the one hand, and why do we call capital gains tax withholding tax on the other hand? The reason for that is the following. This withholding tax is just applicable to non-resident sellers. This is not applicable to non-resident purchasers. It's just applicable to non-resident sellers. So let's explain this by first using an example. In South Africa, there is a Belgium seller. He's not a resident of South Africa. He's been in South Africa for a year or two now. Decided, it's time to go back to Belgium. I like Belgium more than South Africa. So he now sells his property. He sells his property for 5 million rand. Transaction registers in his name. And then he instructs the attorneys to pay over his proceeds into his bank account, which is a foreign bank account. And then he takes the money out of South Africa, and then South Africa will never see him again. When is he going to pay the capital gains tax that he made on that sale? He's now out of South Africa. SARS doesn't want to institute legal proceedings in a cross-border litigation action because it's going to cost them much more money than just to leave the claim. So this was a loophole. Sellers, after selling their property, non-resident sellers, after selling their property, very easily took the money out of South Africa without SARS even knowing it and without anything being declared. So SARS instituted this withholding tax. And it means the following. When a non-resident sells his or her property, the conveyancer that's attending to the property needs to withhold a certain percentage from the selling price. And that percentage needs to be paid over to SARS immediately. So then there's no way for that non-resident seller to take the money out of South Africa without SARS getting their cut of the pie. So now let me explain to you how this withholding tax works. Section 35A says that when a non-resident seller sells his or her property for 2 million rand or more, this withholding tax will be applicable. And the moment this withholding tax is applicable, the moment your seller is a non-resident and he's selling his property for 2 million rand or more, the conveyancer needs to withhold 7.5% of the selling price. If the selling price is 5 million rand, the conveyancers must calculate 7.5% of that 5 million rand, and that needs to be paid over to SARS. Now, this is a significant amount of money. I mean, for SARS to get this big chunk of the seller's selling price or his proceeds is, one can even say, it's quite unreasonable. Unfortunately, that is law. That needs to be done. And there is, luckily, a way to calculate the actual withholding tax, the actual capital gains tax. Remember, these percentages are thumb-sucked by SARS. It is in the act, but they went and had a meeting with all the smart people and accountants, and SARS asked before making this law, how much capital gains tax will a non-resident pay more or less? And the answer was, the capital gains tax on the sale of his property will not be more than 7.5%. So these are just set amounts. There is, however, a way to calculate what the actual capital gains tax is, the actual withholding tax amount that needs to be paid over to SARS. We can do that. It is a service that SDB offers, and we do charge a fee for that. But what is good is we've seen in a lot of situations where a client sells his property for 2 million rand or more. We need to withhold 7.5% on a 3 million rand transaction. That is quite a significant amount, and if I'm correct, that's more or less 225,000 rand. Now, when we withhold that amount, the 225,000 rand, and we then proceed to do our tax directive application, where we calculate the actual capital gains tax or the withholding tax that needs to be paid to SARS, it's much less. I've had a situation where, after calculating the 7.5% on the selling price, we had to withhold 300,000 rand and pay it over to SARS. But then we brought our tax directive application, and at the end of the day, I think it was 17,000 rand was actually due and owing to SARS. So you could see the significant effect that a tax directive application can have on your client. But as I said, this is something that we at STBB do. When we get this instruction and we see that the seller is a non-resident, we immediately contact the seller and explain to him how Section 35A works. That a certain percentage of his selling price needs to be withheld. It is a lot, but there is a way to calculate the actual capital gains tax, the actual withholding tax that's applicable. And then we just pay that over to SARS, and the seller gets his balance back. Which means at the end of the day, he gets more money from his sale of the property. Where your seller is a foreign entity like a company or a partnership, 10% must be withheld. And when your non-resident seller is a foreign trust, 15% of the selling price needs to be withheld. Okay, I don't want to go into too much detail with capital gains tax because that is something that a non-resident seller's accountant will calculate. I think the most important thing in terms of capital gains tax and a non-resident seller that I can advise you on is the following. You know that there is something like a primary residence exclusion of also 2 million rand. Non-residents doesn't enjoy that privilege. If they buy a house in South Africa and they remain non-residents of South Africa, and they only own this one house, it's a beach house in Clifton, where they come to once or twice a year, that is going to be the only place they live when they come to South Africa, but it's not their primary residence. The primary residence is the property in Belgium. And that's why a non-resident seller doesn't enjoy the privilege of having a 2 million rand exclusion on the capital gains tax. Perhaps just remember that. That is very important. Because I've actually spoken to a client yesterday who was a non-resident, and he went on about the 2 million rand exclusion and why does he need to pay anything to SARS because he gets a 2 million rand exclusion. And they explained to him that he's a non-resident. He doesn't have that privilege, unfortunately. So I've also told you about that application, that tax directive application that we do in order to minimize, in order to determine the actual capital gains tax or withholding tax that's applicable when a non-resident seller sells his property for 2 million rand or more. And when we do that application, there are certain deductions that can be made in order to derive to the exact amount that is due and owing to SARS. Now, some of the things that can be deducted in order to derive at the exact amount that's due to SARS is the costs of acquiring the property, the original purchase price, the transfer costs that the seller paid when he was the purchaser. Remember, it's the purchaser that pays transfer costs, and a seller earlier would have been the purchaser. So you can deduct that transfer costs, the transfer duty that was paid to SARS, or VAT if that was applicable, and any professional fees that were paid to attorneys, or even the fees that's paid for getting the compliance certificates. That can be deducted in order to derive to the actual capital gains tax liability. Costs of improvements, renovations, and alterations. that even can be deducted when capital gains tax or withholding tax is calculated. Now, there's a difference between improvements, renovations, and alterations and maintenance. Improvements is when you insert a jacuzzi in your house, or when you rip out the carpets and you replace it with tiles. That's improvements or renovations or alterations. Maintenance or repairs, on the other hand, fixing a leaking roof or fixing a leaking swimming pool, that cannot be deducted when calculating capital gains tax. That's maintenance, that's repairs that had to be done. And that cannot be deducted from when capital gains tax is calculated. I've also told you earlier that non-residents will have to pay income tax on any income that they derive in South Africa. Now, the sources on which non-residents will usually pay income tax is rental income. A non-resident from Belgium, he owns 10 properties in South Africa. He rents all those properties out. Every month, he gets in total 100,000 rands of rental income. He will need to pay income tax to SARS on that rental income. Okay, so now we are going to look at the financial side. We've already looked at what amount a non-resident can get a bond for. The most important thing, and this can be bullet number 4 on your list, non-residents always asks the following questions, and because the agent is the point of contact, you get asked that question. So what they usually ask is, how do I get the money into South Africa? How much money can I bring into South Africa? Are there any restrictions? Is there anything that I need to know or specifically do when I bring money into South Africa? That question is actually very simple. A non-resident who is purchasing a property in South Africa, there's no limitation of how many money he can bring into South Africa. He can bring $1 billion into South Africa if he would like. The most important thing is just when that non-resident brings the money into South Africa, whether he pays it into a account that he opened in South Africa, a bank account, or whether he pays it into your account, or whether he pays it into the transferring attorney's account, he always needs to keep the proof of that payment. When we do a transfer for a non-resident purchaser, and that purchaser pays the deposit and purchase price in cash into our account, we get issued with a deal receipt from the Reserve Bank. And that's the same thing as a proof of payment. It's just a little bit more fancy. But that proof of payment, that proof that the non-resident purchaser brought the money into South Africa on this date, and it was in this currency, and it was this amount, that is of paramount importance. Why? Because if that non-resident purchaser decides to sell his property in 5 or 10 years, he will have to prove when he brought the money into South Africa and how much money he brought into South Africa. If he cannot prove that, he won't be able to take that money out of South Africa once he sold his property. That is very, very important. And the South African Reserve Bank is very strict with its requirements. I mean, with money laundering and the FICA Act, it has now even become more difficult. So always advise your client when they ask you a question of how can I bring the money into South Africa, always advise them to keep the proof of payment. What we at STBB do is when we have a non-resident purchaser and the property registers in his name and he needs to come and collect the original title deed from our office, we compile a nice folder which has the agreement of sale, the commission invoice of the estate agents, it has a copy of the electrical compliance certificate, the plumbing and the detail. It also has a copy of the inwards transfer that STBB received from the Reserve Bank when he paid the money to our account. And we give that folder together with the title deed. There's space for the title deed in that folder as well. We give that to the non-resident purchaser who's now the new owner. And if he in the future decides to sell his property, that folder will contain all the important information that he needs. That is a free service that we offer. We do it for all our non-resident purchasers. Now, I would just like to close with the following. All South Africans and also non-residents can get out of South Africa 1 million rand without any struggle. But if you take more than 1 million rand out of South Africa, you need to prove certain things. You have to get an ID, you have to send that to the Reserve Bank, you need to get a tax reference, and you also need to get a tax clearance certificate from SARS. So guys, that's a lot of information, but if you use that list of points that I've just mentioned to you, that's going to be a good point of contact when you work with your non-resident purchasers or sellers. And we always advise agents, if you're working with non-residents, please refer them to us, because we do specialize in non-resident services. We assist non-resident purchasers, we assist non-resident sellers, we even sometimes help bring non-resident purchasers the money into South Africa. We are using a third-party company who's currency direct to get a much better rate for the non-resident purchasers, so they get more from the money. And then we also provide the additional services of calculating the actual capital gains tax, which at the end of the day saves the non-resident seller a lot of money. So, Michelle, guys, thank you for listening. I hope you've learned something. I hope it wasn't too confusing, because this is a very difficult subject to do over a computer. I've seen in practice that it's much better to do this specific